In this section, we're going to build a Dutch bucket system. Now, the system that we're going to do is for hydroponics. You can also use Dutch buckets in aquaponics. But in the hydroponic system, we're going to do this as a separate system, not as a combined system. And in many cases, I would recommend that, and we'll discuss that as we go along. So here we can see a sketch of the system, a very basic sketch. And I'm just going to discuss the components quickly. So firstly, you'll have a bigger type of reservoir. That will be very nice if you can bury this in the ground. So underneath the ground, and the reason for that is temperature stabilization. Now, these systems work well if you can keep the temperature under control. If you're in an area where it gets very hot, then you must always, in any one of these designs, consider the temperature situation. You don't want your water to get too hot. I've said this now many times through the course, but you don't want your water to be too hot. Otherwise, the ability of the water to dissolve the oxygen and have a certain amount of oxygen in it will become lower with water, and that will lead to all kinds of problems. So you need oxygen in the root zone. With the Dutch bucket system that we're designing now or going to do a DIY on, there's certain things that will help with oxygen in the root zone, and one of the things is to bury your container under the ground, so that the ground temperature actually stabilizes the temperature in the container. So you've got that container. In our case, this is going to be a 210-liter drum. Then you've got your pump there. All that your pump will do is to circulate, in this case, the hydroponic nutrient solution. So it will pump it up on that line, and then towards each one of these buckets. Now remember, the Dutch buckets is 25-liter buckets in this case. It needs not to be 5-gallon bucket. It can be a 3-gallon bucket or so on. But remember, the roots need space to grow. And that's very important. And I've seen some ask in some of the forums, can I grow tomatoes in a 2-inch pipe? Yes, you can if you want miniature plants, but tomatoes will typically, if you give them space, they will fill in a 210-liter drum with their roots. And obviously, you cannot go too small. If you go with too small containers, then there will not be enough place for the roots to form, and you won't have the results that that's possible. All right, so we've got now then our 25-liter buckets in this case, and they must be put on something. So we need a structure underneath them to put them on, and the main reason for that is, remember, you must now drain from them. You can see the drain pipes here from those buckets. That drains into your container that's or your sump that is buried under the ground. So you need to lift them just a little bit, so that drain pipe can flow into your sump. So if you lift this up, then you will see you'll get a problem, because you won't have enough fluid in that sump. Also, another tip that I can give you, don't make that sump container too small. Don't use a 25-liter bucket there. You won't be able to, number one, maintain the water level enough so that it's not a case where you have to fill it up 2 times a day. If you've got a big container like this, relative to your amount of Dutch buckets, then that water level, if it drops a little bit, it's not going to make a big difference, and you can maybe fill it up once a week or once in 2 or 3 days, depending on the growth stage of whatever you grow in your Dutch bucket system. Now, Dutch buckets normally is used for, in many cases, for tomatoes, cucumbers, things like that, fruiting plants that's heavy on nutrients and a bigger root zone space for the roots necessary. So it's mostly used for that. So let's go again. Now we've got the pump. The pump pumps that water up to the top of the Dutch bucket. We'll talk about the media. In many cases, perlite that's used because it's light. There's a lot of air there. It doesn't become soaked with water, so it won't form an anaerobic environment. The water just then moves from that top slowly through that perlite, drains down into the bottom drain, flow back to the sump container, and then is pumped back again. There can also be a timer on this pump. So that pump can be on-off sequences, and I can say so many cycles per day and so on. But in the end, you must watch your plants. How much water does that plant take from the perlite? How quickly do they take that? And if you see there's any condition change in your plant, maybe they will a little bit, then you will step up that cycle. Or if you say that see the perlite is wet and still it's not maybe that hot conditions, then you can make that time period a little bit further apart. So it totally depends on your environment and on the stage of growth of those plants. So then you need a steady structure on that. And you will see in the specific design that I'm going to show you and that we're going to build, I filled these buckets about a quarter to a third full of 20 millimeter stone at the bottom, and the reason for that is it's to stabilize that bucket on the stand so that the wind doesn't blow it over, and that happens. So that's nice for that. It also forms a part where the water can nicely drain into the bottom part. You will see when we do it in practice, the bulkhead fitting or the uniseal or the other fitting that you construct there's not a lot of water at the bottom of the Dutch bucket left. That fitting of yours will just go about 20 millimeters up there, and that will be the amount of water that's left between the cycles. But remember, although perlite doesn't get soaked with water, it does retain some water for the plants in that in between cycle period. So that's then the sketch and what we're going to do. So I'll take this step by step through the whole process so that you know exactly how to do. This is not rocket science, but there's a few things that I will show you that will surely help you to make a success of this system of yours. If I can give advice, this is a small setup, hydroponic setup, that works very nicely, and I run it. I run my aquaponic setup, but I run this similar setups in parallel with that, with its own pump, everything in the hydroponic side, and it's really fun and it works well. So I'm going to show you exactly how I've done a new bolt now, and I've filmed the new bolt so that you can see exactly what's going on there. So let's move on.